Quite an introduction. Thanks, Rob. Well, that was quite an introduction. Only introduction, I think the list was probably long. We got to the bottom and we found me. But yeah, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Sam. I'm a freelance community consultant, so I build technical communities just like this, or help organizations engage with developers in hopefully a meaningful way. I don't know about you guys, but I'm very excited to be here. I've never been in the London Transport Museum and I'm geeking out a little bit. I'm also really excited because we have an amazing group of panelists joining me tonight, and I had the luxury of chatting to them beforehand, and I really think we're in for a treat and some great conversation. But before we get started, I actually just wanted to find out a little about you. I think there's probably 200 odd people in the room, and so it's not all about us, but I'd like to know, we'll do it like we did in school where we raised our hands, but how many of you are currently sitting in a leadership role? So it doesn't matter whether you're leading one person or a whole army, you're currently in a leadership role. Awesome. And keep your hand up if you lead more than 5 people. More than 10? More than 50? Still a few. Cool. Amazing. And then for those of you who didn't put up your hands, who's thinking about potentially going into a leadership role maybe in the next year? So your next step, or within your organization, or a new one, but you think that next step for you is leadership and you're trying to find out a few more facts before you get involved? Few hands. Amazing. And last but not least, but anyone here maybe a bit early on in their career trying to figure out which way to go, whether it's leadership or maybe being an expert in what you do, and it's here to just listen to what people are doing at the moment and potentially make that decision for a later date. So very early on. A few hands. Amazing. Well, hopefully we'll be able to cover everything you guys are after this evening. We have quite a number of different questions put together for tonight, but we will actually open up later on in the evening to questions from you. There will be someone running around with a microphone. The only thing I ask is you could wait for the microphone to get to you, otherwise we can't actually hear the question. But please use the opportunity. I know sometimes it's a bit scary and daunting to ask a question in front of an audience, but it's 5 seconds of being uncomfortable for hopefully a lifetime of knowledge. Just classify this as like 200 of your closest friends just sitting around a room having a conversation. Not scary. Cool. Okay. Well, you're not here to hear me blabber on, so I wanted to actually open up the discussion with an introduction from each of our panelists. I'm sure as technologists you've probably gone on and internet stalked them in some way, but I always think it's better coming from the horse's mouth. So I'm actually going to ask Tim if you'd like to lead and just let everyone know who you are, what you're doing at the moment, and a little bit of an overview of how you got there.
My name's Tim Carman. I run the technology development team at TfL. So it's a team of about 270 people. And working at TfL as a bit of a sort of experience. And I kind of start some of these conversations and saying that, then I hope you had a great journey today. Because if you didn't, at the end of the session, everyone comes around and have a bit of a queue of people. So I had a bit of a check earlier. There was one issue on the Piccadilly line, which hopefully no one had an issue with. But it's always one of those things where people go, oh, I had this problem and. So I started my career really at one of the big cable companies, and I was running a team there. I ended up running a team of a couple hundred people, and I left around about 2008. And the reason I left, I was concerned. It was late 30s. I was concerned I was going to stay there forever, and I wanted to find a new thing, something to do, something to challenge. Also, I was thinking about, could I reinvent myself somewhere else? And I went contracting. Joined TfL as a contractor in the IT team, and there I found something called fares and ticketing, and I always call myself as employee number 1 on contactless card. So the contactless card at the time was about 4 boxes on a presentation. A lot of thought had been behind it, but that's when I joined TfL, and I've kind of gone on that journey with TfL about developing the contactless card platform, releasing it in 2014, and now running a sizable team of 270 people. They are across Scrum Masters, developers, testers, product owners, tech leads, the whole mix, and also more recently business analysts. And what we build is teams. We have 28 teams, from Bumblebee to Supernova to Nebula. Those are the names of the teams that we have in here. One wasn't going to be called a team, so I thought about calling them Deadpool, and they found a new name. It was Special K. It's a great film, Deadpool, by the way. I've been seeing it with my son. And so now, I've been there now, coming on for 10 years, and we're working on, the reason I like TfL is the fact that when we do stuff quite big. So we released the ticketing app, And the ticketing app, within 4 or 5 months has got to 800,000 users. So the things that we do are large. The contactless card platform collects £6 million every night. So it's kind of, whatever we do, we tend to do as big scale.
Huge scale.
Yeah.
Thank you. Pass over to Manasi. Sorry, Manasi.
Don't worry, I'll sort that out in a minute. So, hi, my name is Mansi. It's like a Nancy with an M. Just makes it so much more easier. Forget that extra A. It causes a lot of confusion. So, I'm originally from India. I've been in the UK for about 8.5 years now. I was speaking to Sam and I said, I don't come from a computer science background. I'm on degree, or like on paper, I'm an electronics engineer. I've been working with Thoughtworks for about 6.5 years now. So for people who don't know, Thoughtworks is a software consultancy, and a large part of what we do is around digital transformation and agile transformation. So a large part of my role ends up being working closely with head of techs and head of engineering, helping with the tech strategy, and of course the large part of my role being a tech lead. The nature of the consultancy is where the teams are different, the sizes are different, the goals are different. So what that means is I'm working very closely with the business, with the team in Words, and head of tech, head of engineering, and so on and so forth. So that's exactly what I'm doing now.
And a little bit about your career?
I don't have as awesome a journey as these guys, but I'm sure I'll be able to tell you some of it. So I started as an electronics engineer. It didn't quite click with me. I enjoyed programming a lot more. I think I enjoyed seeing robots move around. Not so much the electronics of it inside, but more so of what you can do from it over the wire. So I kind of found Thoughtworks through Women in Tech, and the more I read about it, I was like, I really want to be part of this, because they care about people, they care about software, and they care about changing the world through software. So, and that's how I got stuck in with Thoughtworks.
Amazing, thank you.
Thanks.
And Radek?
Hi. Hello? Yeah. Hi, so I'm Radek Majder. I am Head of Development Management at McLaren Applied Technologies. Not the entire McLaren. There are several different areas to McLaren, and I'm in Applied Technologies. There we work on a lot of diverse products and projects. We have a number of business units that focus on different lines of business. So we do things in transport, or as we like to call it, intelligent transport. We do things obviously for automotive and racing, but we also do things in health, well-being, medical type space, and other various kind of partnerships and so on. So at McLaren we have electronics and mechanics and all of that stuff. So quite a lot of the time we tend to deal with devices, IoT, whether that's in a kind of fleet sense around vehicles, maybe autonomous vehicles or problems like that, or maybe wearables on humans. And at the center of all of that is data. We have a relatively sizey team of data scientists, simulation engineers, DSP engineers, and what we do with that data and how we treat it is quite interesting. But majority of the goals are either to inform on a particular condition or to maybe predict about what is going to be happening. So that's kind of, we're about, in my area, about 70 people, various software engineering roles, tech delivery managers and BAs, that sort of thing, product managers. And in terms of background, well, I'm not a software engineer either, and for the majority of my career I've worked with software engineers. Somehow I've managed to survive amongst those people. My first degree was in product design or industrial design, and my kind of I was hoping the first job was going to be in a kind of design consultancy where you get to design lots of cool stuff. So I did an internship there. And the person that kind of brought me in and walked me around, introducing me to everybody, walked up to somebody and said, well, here's Radek, he's here with us for 3 months. Do we have anything for him to do? And the answer was, yeah, we have all those beer bottles after the last party that need cleaning out. So that was kind of my start, and I thought, and maybe a lesson about leadership as well, and how you kind of treat people when they join. And from there, I guess part of industrial design was a lot of 3D, CAD, and that sort of stuff. So that got very interesting. A friend of mine got a job with a company where they did a lot of animation and lots of kind of 3D interactive stuff. And this is back in the kind of late 90s, early 90s, maybe and towards the kind of 2000 era when I got my job there, and we were doing real-time rendered interactive stuff over the web. So at the time that was quite cool. And that was an interesting place that took me all around the world. I worked with that company in Sydney in Australia, and I've moved with them to the US and worked with some celebrities and all sorts of exciting stuff like that. Then I went on to working in the games development industry, and a couple of different smaller companies in Australia, and then I worked with Electronic Arts for about 9.5 years, doing all manner of game-related stuff. And at some point I thought, a lot of people that I met seemed to think that, oh, that's the coolest job in the world. You must just sit around and play games all day. And some of my friends who worked in the real world were like, yeah, that's not a real job. You know, what is that, gaming? So I thought I'd try it out and see if I could make it in the real world of software development and technology and so on. And yeah, so I kind of moved on, and somewhere along the line, I worked at the BBC on kind of back end of the iPlayer, and at one point in the news technology team, everything to do with whatever you see when you watch BBC News. And now I'm at McLaren.
Amazing, quite a journey. And to pass over to Rose?
Yeah, hi, so I'm Rosemary Hitchcock. I work at YOOX-NET-A-PORTER. So for those of you who don't know, that's a luxury fashion company, purely online. So we have our own main websites, which are Net-A-Porter and Mr. Porter, but we also merged with YOOX, and they have a lot of websites for a lot of designer companies like Valentino, and they also have Ferrari, who sell clothes, if anyone didn't know. So we also have websites and distribution that we manage for a lot of third-party companies as well. My specific area is in the fulfillment side, so I look after order management and warehouse management side of things and shipping, etc. So we do have quite cool warehouses with automation and robotics and miles of conveyor belts, so it's quite cool, like physical technology as well as the software. So yeah, I've worked at Net-A-Porter for the last 8 years. And before that, I was an IT consultant, but I went on a project whilst I was consulting doing retail, and I quite liked it and decided that I didn't want to keep moving around. So I applied for a job at Net-A-Porter and started working there, and then I've worked, on the website side, on the product side, and then kind of found my home in the fulfillment area. And I've done various jobs there: business analyst, scrum master, technical project manager, delivery manager, and then most recently head of technology, where I look after 5 software teams that do the order management and fulfillment. And it's a really key part of the business because the website is amazing and it always tries to be cutting edge, but one of the main things that we differentiate ourselves on is our customer service. So if anyone's ever shopped there, your parcel arrives and it's wrapped up like a gift in tissue paper and ribbons. We do same-day delivery service with our own fleet of vans within London and New York and Hong Kong. So there's a lot of technology behind the scenes that makes sure that we can offer that luxury service to people and keep those service levels high. And that's kind of my main part of my job and my main motivation there.
Amazing, thank you. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into all our panelists and where they've come from. And hopefully, as I said, the discussion will drive on from that. But actually, to kick off, Tim, if I can maybe come back to you. And you said you went into a leadership role quite early on in your career, almost with the first company that you worked for. And I'm sure your leadership style has potentially changed over the years. Well, has it changed over the years, should probably be the question. And if it has, what have you done to sort of identify when changes needed to be made, and then sort of pivot within your career and your style to be the amazing leader you are today?
Yeah, it's interesting when the question came through at the very beginning, I kind of reached back into my memory and worked out exactly what happened at the very beginning. And so I was a software development, I came from that background. I would probably say I didn't intend to be a leader of a large team. It was kind of a journey you go on, and it's you work hard, and then all of a sudden you find you're on an escalator and your career kind of takes off. And I went from small teams, 10, 20, very quickly to about 150, 200. At the very beginning, when we were walking over here, I was talking to Rosemary, and she was saying, when you get into a leadership role, you often find it's not what you're doing previously, but it's actually what you can do, or they saw something in you. And I think that's the case, because when I first got it, I break my career up into two parts. When I was at the cable company, and now I've been at TfL. When at that cable company, I was on quite a rapid learning exercise. And I kind of, at the very beginning, I might have still coded and fixed defects. A bit of a waste of time, to tell you the truth. But actually, it was a process I kind of went through. And what I kind of found out about myself is I'm really good at doing change, and I'm also quite good at explaining the big picture. So that's kind of one of the things that I think in my career has really helped me, that I can do change and I can understand people and explain where we're going. The problem with that is, though, is there's quite a few people out there don't do change very well. So when you go and talk to people and I kind of go, right, we're going to go over here, sometimes at the very beginning you look behind me and no one's coming behind at all. So it's kind of, what I've kind of done, if I break it into two parts, I think the first part I learned my trade at a cable company, this is the name actually, and the second part, I was probably being more myself with a bit more skill at TfL. So at TfL, we went from when I first joined, as I said before, it was about, I came for contacts card. The only thing I was going to do was implement it because it was very big, scary, and it affects Londoners. It was very public facing. So at the cable company, I was on digital TV, broadband, and telephony, very customer facing. And this is also very customer facing. And my first day at TfL is, so how does Oyster work? Because it's this huge platform, 20,000 readers, and actually I wanted to know it never goes down. Actually, behind the scenes, it's quite clunky. It's 20,000 little billing engines. But so when I came on board, they introduced me to actually one of the people over there, which is Peter. So they said, well, we're going to do a bespoke software development. We've got 2 developers. And I'm kind of going, right, okay. So I've just come from 200 people. And I'm kind of going, right, okay. And we did look about buying things, but actually what we've ended up doing is a bit of a journey. So for me, what I do now is that I have these stand-ups that I do once a month, and I explain. So my developers and all their team, they worry about features. I actually worry about operations. And the reason I worry about operations, if it doesn't work, there's no point worrying about features. So the things that I tend to do at my stand-ups, so for 270 people, there's 2 of them, about 100 each. I talk about the successes, I talk about the things that I can see on the bigger piece that people are working on, I name individuals. I celebrate the successes, but I also talk through areas of concern, such as operations, such as we went live with this on the ticketing app, and actually this piece of software didn't work. And actually then we went and did this, or how much things cost. So what I try to do is pull together the piece about how the whole team kind of works together. And I think that's one of the things that I've done really well over my career, and it's held me instead. In both companies, I went quite quickly through. I worked very hard, and then I went through, and the same with TfL. I kind of reinvented myself, and I was a team of 1, and then I've ended up running, well, it was 100 on contactless, and now it's 270 to put everyone together.
That's amazing. And it's probably true testament to know that one of your first team members is still here. So if you want to know actually how to manage a team, you probably have to go chat to him, and he'll tell you how amazing it is. But you spoke a little bit about how you sort of set up decision making within your team. And I understand, Rose, you do something that's quite interesting in sort of a more diplomatic way in which you handle decision makings within your team. I'd love to know a little bit more about that and how the team at Net-A-Porter manages those decisions.
Yeah, so like a few of my colleagues up here, I also haven't come from a development background. So as being head of technology, obviously I'm responsible for the technical decisions made in my area, so I have to surround myself with the experts and the right people who can, give me that information. So I don't like to just come in and be like, oh, I've decided this is how we're going to do it. I like to give that opportunity to the teams and actually let them kind of argue it out and convince each other, so using arguments and data. So we'll have a discussion and they can say, you know, this is what research I've done, this is the way that I think we should approach it. And then other people will question that, maybe present a counter proposal. And in that way, we'll kind of come to a consensus. And I feel that that actually makes the team more bought into whatever solution we're going to implement, and also kind of gives them autonomy and ownership over it. So there's no grumblings around, oh, this is a stupid idea, who decided to do that? So where I can, I do try to let the team decide, whether that be the language, kind of the development approach, kind of the deployment pipeline. I try to give the team as much autonomy in those kind of decisions, as long as they can kind of convince me and other very well-informed colleagues of why it's a good idea. And I think the other thing is around decision making in processes. So, there's certain things that I need from the teams and I need them to do, or certain information or certain targets, and we kind of agree those. But then how the team choose to get there, all of my teams have different processes, different ways of working, and they agree that within their teams. So, they do continuous improvement, they'll retrospect, we get a new person in with new ideas who's worked somewhere else, and we're like, oh yeah, great, let's try that. And it's not me saying, oh, I'm the boss, I'm going to say, right, this is how we're all going to work now. And I think kind of being a little bit more democratic and letting people feed into that decision and convince each other, rather than me convincing them, actually brings everyone along with you and makes it a more harmonious team, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Now, Radek, I understand that you also use a lot of data to sort of drive change within the roles that you've been in, especially with potentially outsider stakeholders as opposed to the physical team that you're in at the moment. Could you speak a little bit more about that, and potentially just sort of some of the times where that's worked quite well to bring data to the conversation to drive change when stakeholders might not be particularly on board with the change that needs to be made?
Yeah, sure. So I think that's kind of one of those things that I learned somewhere along the way, that actually to convince people, you kind of come with an argument, but really it's just your opinion at the end of the day to the other people. So to get them across, often it does help to have some research, some data, something that you can point at and say, well, actually, it's not just me saying this, what I found in the data is that. I guess maybe one example, which is kind of not necessarily very specific to a technology solution or something, but is more to do actually quite recently with the hiring pipeline. And if you imagine what that sort of looks like, obviously you go through a kind of interview process and all that, but at the point where someone decides to join your company and start working with you, between that and them arriving and their kit being kind of ready for them on their desk, I kind of find that as a pretty important point. I think, when you join a new company, you're quite excited and you want to feel like you're really welcome, and you get there and everything's kind of, your phone, your laptop, whatever is all nice and ready. And we've had a couple of incidents where that wasn't the case. New starters turned up and unfortunately their kit wasn't ready and kind of scramble around. And at one point I kind of thought about it and looked at the kind of whole process, mapped it out in my head, and then I kind of wrote it out on email with just kind of little dash marks to kind of suggest arrows. And I thought, there's a lot of process steps in here. Do we really need all this? So I wrote to the finance team and the recruitment team and the IT guys and said, look, this is what it looks like. I think we could optimize this process. There's a lot of steps here. And there was no response whatsoever for a number of days. And I thought, okay, anyone out there? So I poked again. And someone from finance went, yeah, we can't remove any of those steps. There's, things change quite rapidly and we need all of them, full stop. About 2 weeks later, we received a couple of new starters and they had a pretty poor experience with having their equipment ready. There were some mistakes that happened on the IT side. But I thought, well, how do I get across to these people? Because clearly emailing them, telling them about it and saying this is a big problem and it's not a great image for the company, for me, for our team. We should do better than that. And so I thought, well, what is the cost of a laptop, or 2 laptops in this case? And I thought, what is the cost of one of these people or 2 of these people sitting around doing nothing for a week? And as it turns out in this case, and we did luckily have loaner kind of equipment that had been used before but was suitable enough for them to do something, but it did take us a couple of days to scramble around. But in actual fact, through a number of other stuff-ups, it took about 5 weeks to get 2 new laptops for these people. And I added up the cost and sent that to everyone, and the finance director, within like 5 minutes, responds, yes, you need to get everybody together and have this meeting and sort this problem out. So I guess that's kind of one example of trying to find data on something and making it relevant to the audience or the people you're trying to address, so that they can actually see, oh yeah, I understand what this means, and yeah, we should definitely fix that. Often we tend to focus on just our bit of the process. We kind of go, well, I'm doing my job really well. And somewhere along the line, HR were involved, and they're like, well, IT screwed something up, so we don't need to attend this meeting. And I'm like, well, actually, you could help to shorten the whole cycle, so you need to be in this meeting. But yeah, that's kind of one example of how you use data, and obviously there are lots of others. But
I'm sure a lot of examples in your day-to-day lives, you've probably had a conversation with someone and the same thing of, oh, well, we're doing our part right, and potentially there might be some data there to bring in to show maybe the cost or the downtime that something affects. Now, I understand, I'm going to get this wrong every single time, so it's
It's like a Nancy.
Nancy with an M, Mansi. I want to say Manasi every time, it's terrible. And I'm usually really good with names. Mansi, now I understand that obviously in your role, not only are you leading a team, but your team may change quite frequently. So sort of like Radek, in terms of dealing with stakeholders, you're dealing with the stakeholder of the client, as well as a team that might be different depending on the project, week on week or month on month. How is it that what have you done to sort of be able to identify, not everyone gets managed in the same way, so identify when you need to change your leadership style and adapt to hopefully inspire every team that you're a part of?
Yeah, so it is very true that the team that I'm in changes very often. So it's like it could be 3 months, 6 months, and then 4 weeks, and it changes very often, and the size is very different as well. The experience is very different as well. So I've actually learned this the hard way, especially earlier on. I think I now remember some conversations, and it's like when there are certain conflicts on a team and you think, I don't understand why I'm not able to convince this person, but we're talking about facts, we're talking about data, like why is it that I'm not able to get through? And then one day it clicked. Unfortunately, I think it clicked quite earlier on because I had the opportunity to sort of shift teams and shift people I work with that often, is when I was like, no, you're right. I mean, that's fine. Let's do it that way. And it just switched. That's when I realized that all this individual kind of needed was not persuasion, but a little more what they call bridging as a style. So it's more like, no, like I will take some of your opinions and you take some of mine. And it's crazy. Like I hadn't noticed some of these things until someone mentioned it to me. They spoke to me about like these influencing styles and every individual falls naturally in one of the 4 quadrants. And I know where I fall into. So what I tend to do is actively try to see if I can fit in other quadrants if required. It's not easy. I do still struggle sometimes in certain quadrants, but I definitely try to sort of keep that at the front of my mind. And I guess to recognize where it's different, like I care a lot about the team that I'm in because it's really important to me to sort of build that relationship, because somebody else has given me the opportunity to sort of move forward, and I want to do that with the people I work with. So whether it's through 101s or whether it's through going and having drinks, having a meal, build that relationship, understand how people work, and it becomes easier to then spot the quadrants.
Amazing. Now, I understand, Tim, a lot of your career has been potentially moving teams from waterfall into more agile approach, and like, how do I always do this? I can't believe it. Sorry about this. Sort of having to potentially influence change where not everyone wants to change. Especially people that have been in a certain way of working for a number of years, now implementing a change to go, well, now we're going to do things this way, can sometimes be quite tricky. How have you sort of managed that in your career, and convincing people of another approach, I suppose, is the way?
So, yeah, we went on quite a journey. So on the Contractors Cloud platform, originally 3 people, we ended up to a team of about 100, 8 agile teams. And that was a real real difficult process, very challenging, very difficult, and we continually iterate around and learn and make changes, and then we often create that safe environment. I think that's one of the things we managed to create there, is that it's okay to fail as long as you kind of don't keep on failing, but we kind of iterate quite successfully to make some changes. So what happened once we post launch of Contactless, there was a bit of a change, and there was a bit of a reorganization, and all of the people within technology development, so developers, testers from the whole lot, all came in into one area under myself. And a lot of these people were working on maintenance pieces, or maybe they hadn't won work quite recently. So we went through quite a large change process at this moment in time. And one of those things, is that there was about 60, 70 people within a development, plus another 30, 40 in test. And one of the things, we were all used to doing waterfall. And you would have thought that, you look at the Contactless went so well. We've ended up selling it to New York, Sydney through third parties. And what happened was that you would have thought people would jump on the bandwagon of going into an agile process. But more often than not, what people would say is, oh no, it was different on a large project. Large projects are quite easy. The smaller projects are more difficult, and we don't have the money, etc. So we kind of went on a bit of a process here, is that a lot of the test people and the dev people were on separate floors. They didn't really talk and had documentation flying back and forth. And so we ended up had these three things. One is we're going to get better at software delivery through going to Agile. The second one would be, that means we win more work and more projects. And the third one was we get more opportunities. And those are the three things that I kind of sold it on. So we get good at delivery, we win more work, and people get opportunities. And what we did is went on a process with Sarah and the Scrum Master team, and we brought in a third party to help us to move these teams forward. So we had the three Pathfinder teams, and we actually got the developers, the testers, a product owner, and Scrum Master. Actually, we added a Scrum Master and got them sitting together in the same space. And we also sent them on training, and when they came back from the training, that's the point when they went to the training as a team, not as an organization structure. So not as a test team, but as a team of people who work together. And when they then came back, we added a Scrum Master to them so that the change would stick. And we did this for there's one platform, there's three platforms we did it for actually, but one of them was called TrackerNet. So TrackerNet, if you ever want to see something that's really impressive, it manages, it has a representation of all of the underground. So it's 10 million events come into it a day, all in memory, and it kind of renders every tube that's running, every signaling, every move of whatever happens. And so what we managed to do is we got the people sitting together, but even though we got a board going, and then we kind of went through this process whereby, what used to happen is that the defects were found 9 months after creation. But we got them sitting together, but there'd be 2 weeks of development and then 2 weeks of testing. And we've kind of slowly moved them all. And I kind of knew it was working when we got to a point where on the same day that a defect was created, a defect was created, developed. We actually found it on the same day by the testers, so they're kind of working together. I also used to call it the impossible mission, which is we managed to do a lot of automated testing within this platform that does all of the monitoring for all of the representation of all of the trains as they go around the network. And it's 1,500 tests, it takes 3.5 weeks. We managed to get it down to about 3 hours. And so we run it continually. So what allows us to do now is we're kind of upskilling the testers so that they're moving from manual to more automated testing. So I think there's a process there that we kind of went through, and it's been really tough over the last year. We've moved people from a place where they weren't winning stuff, and since then we've won a lot more work on Crossrail. We're doing a new bot at the moment that should go live in the next 6 months. There's so much more work we've won because of the work we've done here, and some of the feedback we've got is we've never delivered so much so quickly. Right. They still sometimes complain about, so why are we doing so much on testing? But the quality then goes out the door. Okay.
That's an amazing way to to handle and change a team's mindset. Now to sort of jump across to you, Rosemary, I understand that training is also something that YOOX-NET-A-PORTER looks at, but potentially not able to send the entire team on training. And I'm sure people in this room have wanted training or wanted to go on training. Potentially, budgets aren't there and things like that. And I understand you sort of manage that in a different way. Could you just speak a little bit about how you guys are sort of developing your team at the moment?
Yeah, so we've got a few different approaches that we've tried in my area. So, we just have normal, send a few people on a course, get them to bring something back, you do a brown bag lunch, you know, and there is some value in that, but I think people, you know, actually miss out on, you know, other parts that they perhaps didn't hear. So we tried one approach that was really successful where we wanted to start being a bit more DevOpsy in the teams, but we just chose to use Puppet, and we didn't really have any skills or expertise in the team, but I couldn't send, you know, 40 people off on a training course. So we, you know, it was far too expensive. I didn't have the budget for that. So we found a company that offered training, and instead of going on their course, persuaded them for a much more reasonable price to come in and run 3 lots of sessions, you know, in-house, so that for, you know, the price of sending about 3 or 4 people on the course, I actually got, you know, 30 people in-house trained. So, you know, the team really appreciated, you know, kind of the skills development that they got, and it meant that the content of the training wasn't kind of diluted into a half an hour brown bag lunch session. So that's one thing that we've tried. Another approach that we're trying is we have started using Scala a few years ago. It's quite a new technology really compared to some others, and it's actually really difficult to find experienced developers. A lot of the time they are way over our budget, or they just do contracting. So we find people with other skills and cross-train them, and you know, we've tried that, but as soon as people get experience, they often will then move on to lucrative contracting careers, unfortunately. So an approach that we're taking now is that we're just getting one lucrative, expensive contractor to spend some time with the team as a coach to the team. So they've kind of got a mentor just on site a couple of days a week. So it's not completely blowing my budget, but it means the team have got an expert to ask, to help with code reviews, to help with design, but I don't have to obviously have the budget to have, you know, a full-time, really expensive contractor. So the team love, again, the development that they get and the access to the experts that they get, and that one person then gets to build up some knowledge of our projects and our ways of working. So they're just a couple of different approaches that we've tried to try and ensure that despite various budgets, we can still keep upskilling the team.
Amazing, and hopefully, people get more trained up. I want to just deviate the conversation. I'm a bit aware of time, and I actually wanted to approach another topic within leadership, and something that we talk a lot about at the moment is obviously women in technology, and as well as minorities in technology. And I just want to bring that to the conversation a little bit when it comes to leadership. Is one, we have quite a lovely, diverse crowd here tonight, and two, I'd just like to get people within leadership's thoughts on anyone here who's looking to potentially go into a leadership role that might not look like the carbon copy of what we're used to seeing in the industry, how they are able to manage being a part of that. So I want to jump to you and just ask, you're obviously a woman in technology as well as not necessarily being from the UK. How have you identified a bit of bias within being not necessarily within Thoughtworks, but potentially with your clients or your team, and how have you managed that, particularly on maybe some of the bad days where it hasn't been as easy to deal with, I suppose?
Not that you would have noticed, but I'm not just a woman in tech. I'm a small, perceivably young-looking woman in tech. And given the consultancy scenario, every client that I go to, even without them saying anything, I know they've made a judgment of what potentially my experience is when I walk into that room. And this is a problem I have seen women like me face quite a lot, and I'm sure even for the likes of you who probably look more experienced than I do.
You're trying to say I look old?
No, not at all. But I'm sure you've experienced similar, but I think there are days where it's easier to deal with it. There are days where you want to fight it, and there are days where you just can't be bothered. And it's the days that you can't be bothered is where I think it's really, unfortunately, impactful for the team. Because if you think of a team of 5 or 6, and there are 2 women on that team, and if that's how they feel, you're really impacting not just the team, but 2 individual people's journey. And I think Thoughtworks, fortunately, as a company, is very conscious of this and has done quite a lot within the company and with the clients to sort of bring this diversity and inclusion in. I just want to digress a little bit because there's this quote somebody mentioned which I thought was absolutely fantastic, which is diversity is being asked, is being invited to a party, inclusion is being invited to dance. So really there's quite a lot of difference between just having women on your team and making them part of that journey or your journey. So my husband's also from Thoughtworks, is doing the same role as me, and I think he only started to really understand the gravity of certain bad days of what it is like to be in a woman in tech when I think he saw me walk away from some conversations because some days I just couldn't be bothered. And an example of that is I think it's very simple, small things. I don't know how often this has happened to women in the room, but if you're in a middle of a conversation which is getting pretty heated, a tech conversation, I don't know how often you felt like there was no eye contact with you at all. You pretty much could have left the room and it would have made no difference. And I don't think people quite realize the impact that it has on women when that happens. So yes, there are bad days and you just have to deal with it. And what helps is having an ally. I think because my husband has now seen this or experienced this, he tends to be that ally who goes, sorry, it wasn't me who asked that question. It was this lady here, so I don't know why you're looking at me. Or, divert that attention, involve people, so that ally is important on a bad day. I think the other thing that really helps as well is, I think most people don't intend to do this. That's why I guess it's called an unconscious bias. Bring awareness. I think women talking about the impact that it has on them, I think will really help build that ally network quite a lot. So
amazing. And I actually want to jump to Rose on this as well. I understand that in sort of the senior team, I suppose, to put it that way, at Net-A-Porter, you are the only woman in the room. And rather than asking how you feel about that, we have quite a few leaders here today that potentially are male or not necessarily sitting with the same sort of issues. Rather than asking you how you feel about that, I find it's always sort of women sitting going, this is how I feel and this is how we should educate. And I think sometimes it might be nice to have someone else sort of chairing that part of the process, I suppose. And so what would you say to those people and how can they go back to their organizations and make sure that, one, they're making eye contact, but what else to make sure that more women are going into technology as well as leadership?
There's a few other senior women, but not in my area. So most of the meetings that I go to, the leadership meetings, are all men and me, and I sometimes feel like I'm the only one who ever mentions diversity or women in tech, and it's kind of a bit of a joke, but I try to persevere to keep it on the agenda. But for me, I think what's really important is that people in leadership positions don't just look for people who behave like they did when they were at that level and expect the same behavior that they would exhibit in women. Sometimes women behave like men and sometimes they don't, and I sometimes feel that in order to be considered successful and doing a good job, your managers expect you to behave how they would, but whether emotional intelligence is a stronger characteristic in women, sometimes it is, not always. Whether you want to be really assertive or your leadership style is more democratic or partnership, if you're having successful results and your team enjoy coming to work and do a good job, it's the results that are important, not whether or not you sound authoritative when you tell someone this is what we're doing, rather than what do you think about this for an idea. So for me, I think, I have to remember as well not to just want to encourage women who behave like I did when I was at that level. I have to think the same, but I think for any male leaders in the room, try and look for what other strengths some of the women or other areas can have, and that they could bring something different to the team, just a new energy, new ideas and new ways of working that actually might start to drive innovation and improvement, because just having an echo chamber of people who've had a similar experience, behave in a similar way and kind of agree with you, it's just going to slow you down, and you won't progress as fast. And I like to think that since I've joined the leadership team, I've brought a different perspective and, you know, a different way of looking at things, and I hope that you know, will make a change. And I really hope as well to open that door for other women to follow behind me.
Amazing, thank you. And just sort of keeping on that sort of line of not necessarily women in technology, but the different person in the room, or not necessarily the imposter, but we talk about imposter syndrome and different things within our organizations. And actually, a large majority of the panelists don't necessarily come from a software development background, but are sitting leading teams of software developers. That must also change the way in which you potentially have a management style or a leadership style, but also influence how you interact with the team. And I'd like to throw this to Radek, if possible, just talk about, you know, obviously not coming from that stereotypical early on career, how that has affected you and what you do today. I'm sure there's a few people in the room that potentially aren't sitting as specific software developers.
I think Rosemary said something earlier on about how she's kind of adjusted her style and is more kind of collaborative and inclusive and looks to others, the experts, for ideas. I think that's probably something that I've kind of somehow naturally picked up early on as well. And I tend to think, sometimes, I don't know, maybe it's like a little chip on my shoulder going, well, I'm not a software developer, so what do I have to say in this conversation? I feel like I've been around software development for long enough to kind of pick up the right smells, if you like, if something's going the right way or not. But at the same time, I tend to think that people are there because they're there because they want to do a great job. And I want to start with that at the outset, that we're all here to do a great job, rather than be kind of suspicious and think that there will be things they're trying to do just to pull in their own direction, which naturally sometimes people do. But in a group situation, I think you can use that to bounce ideas off other people and empower them. And actually, I find that helps. I find satisfaction in helping somebody grow their career and develop and have kind of one-on-one conversations about how they can become better at what they do and where the direction takes them. That seems to build up a better relationship and some trust. And in kind of creating maybe forums where, you know, one example is we had, one of the things I tried to do is, I had a team. There were about 55 people in this team, and we had 2 architects. And one of the first things that I was told when I joined the team was, we have a huge bottleneck on architecture, and the teams are always waiting for the architects to, you know, come up with a design and tell them what to do, etc. And I thought, well, that's kind of okay, but we should be able to solve this. And there were a number of other people in the team who were maybe aspiring architects or wanted to kind of dip their toes into architecture. Certainly we're able to do solution design. And I thought, well, why don't we devolve some of that responsibility and allow those people to do that, but in a kind of safe environment where amongst their peers they can have a discussion about what they are proposing, where the design is going, and with the architects present, and kind of turn it into a bit of a learning exercise as well. And that seemed to work quite well. So I tried to use those sort of techniques amongst other situations and whatever I come across to get the best out of people who are the experts. And I think that kind of lifts them up and gives them a voice and makes them feel valued. And like Rosemary said, it's not a kind of authoritative, I've made all the choices and designs, and actually what you've said is nice, however, go this way, please. So I tried to stay away from that sort of thing.
Amazing. And I think before we jump to some questions from you guys, I know you also hopefully have some questions. I just wanted to sort of ask Tim you one more question with regards to sort of Radek's comment there on you know, getting the day-to-days done and having these bottlenecks and different ways of iterating and pivoting, the team structure or the way in which you do something to manage that. You've obviously here, especially at TfL, are making some really sort of cutting-edge, innovative things. But there's also the day-to-days of keeping some of the stuff that you've already got planned in the roadwork or currently developed, maintained or put together. How are you managing leading a team and being innovative and cutting-edge while still getting those things done? And is there any sort of tidbits you could potentially share with the audience that's hoping to be just as innovative as TfL?
So I've spoken before about, so we run around about 28 teams, and one of the big things we do is we keep teams together, because there's nothing more disruptive than a new project, a new team. Because what we found is it takes, for us, around about 5-6 months to get a team running. And once the team is running, they're really, really efficient. So what we do tend to do is keep teams together, and we bring projects to teams. And in one of the walls, it's probably about as big as this behind me. I've got a big Kanban board. I'm quite a visual guy. And I kind of have all of the projects and small works. And we've got on the left-hand side all the roadmap stuff that might come in, but it might be just ideas. Then we've got the shaping that's kind of coming into the team. And then we've got the teams, the 28, and we bring projects or small works to teams. And by keeping them together, that works really well. So inside there, we can have a small lot of projects, but also we actually, within a team, we say I have 80% of project work and 20% of BAU. So by keeping the team together, and they pull from their own backlog, that means we get an awful lot through those relevant teams. And one of the best things I know we've done recently is we've just gone live with, we've moved one of our main platforms into Azure, one of the main websites, and we've got a lot of App Insights data in there. And that's made it really rich, where before it was all locked away within operations. And now the developers can see it, and they can see the richness of it. And what they're doing now is bringing it onto their own backlog of work. Therefore, they've got 80% of project stuff, but they've got the 20%. And that really means that the website is so much more responsive, it stays up. We have in a week, we have about 200,000-300,000 customers on one of these websites. And so by pulling them into the team and keeping teams together, I think that works really well. The other thing that we have done is we've tried a few times on this. We've got a DevOps team. And we've looked at separating out into the Agile teams. We've actually, at the moment, got a centralized DevOps team. And what that does is sit there and makes lots of small changes and protects the delivery of the other pieces. Kind of going forward, we are looking, at the moment, we've got a big project kicking off at the moment, of moving the DevOps into the team. So as I said before, we always iterate around, try new things, and learn from them. So at the moment, we're moving towards a decentralized DevOps for some major key projects we've got going forward. But we also have this centralized DevOps that keeps a lot of the noise away from our product development.
Amazing. I'm assuming sort of the value in that is actually just identifying when things need to change and not necessarily sticking to one solution as such. But as I said in the beginning, we'd also love to hear, you came here with questions. So we have a microphone over there, and it's going to run around. As I said before, try wait for the microphone to get to you. And as soon as you're done answering your question, if you could give it back to them so they can run to the next person. Seeing as the microphone's on the side of the room, or we'll just walk across. So we have a lovely lady over there.
Sorry, first, it's fine.
Okay. And if you could also just, if there is someone specific you'd like to address the question to, if you could just let them know.
General question. How do you manage upward leadership or upward influencing?
Who would like to jump in at that? Anyone with specific experience? Is there anyone in particular you'd like to answer that?
I can cover that a bit, actually. I work for the CTO, Shashi Verma. The thing I would say, he's very supportive of what we've done, because he sees the value of, we've changed from an organization that we outsource a huge amount of work to now we are very innovative and creative, and we've done stuff for a lot of value for the money stuff. So for me, with Shashi, generally he lets me get on with it. Having said that, though, there are things whereby managing upwards, or even I call it managing outwards a bit. So we do a lot of agile work within technology development, but we're also kind of charged with trying to spread it out across the wider team as well. And that's actually proved across my peer group, which is the hosting people, the infrastructure people. And that's kind of proving quite challenging because it's moving into a different area. So, we do quite a lot of show and tells. In fact, I came from a session today whereby we're trying to so we do a lot of work in Azure and AWS, and we build a lot of infrastructure. And the hosting team as well, we're trying to say, well, why don't you use some of our templates? So we all come from a software side. They come from a tin side. And it's kind of, when we're moving this together, is that what we're trying to say is, with software and source control, you can kind of get these patterns out. So we're trying to show and tell stuff as well at that kind of level across the wider teams. Well, primarily, I must admit, my boss has actually been very supportive, because at the end of the day, I suppose, he looks in on it, and he's been successful himself. and he was very tied into what we were doing within contactless.
I think we have another question there. Oh, and then the guy in front of him.
Okay. I wanted to ask, Nancy, what you were saying about just immediately feeling kind of excluded from the conversation because somebody stops looking at you as soon as it gets heated or in depth or whatever. And you explained how it's great to have an ally in the room, but do you have any one-liners or ways of saying, hey, you're not talking to me anymore, that doesn't make it sound like you're whining or you're girly? What do you say, or ways to go through experience that as well? I don't know how you say, pull it out.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, because I've had this conversation at length with people around me going, why should I have to ask to be involved in a conversation that feels odd? Also, by the way, I've only just thought of it. So when I say young looking, I don't mean, oh wow, look at my skin. I mean as a complete disadvantage, like it actually acts as a disadvantage. So one thing that's helped, that I've been told other people do, is if you see it happening to somebody else, it actually works. I've seen this happen where if you see it's happening to this lady here and you're talking to me, if I start looking at this lady here, you automatically will start looking at this lady here. And maybe the other way to get somebody else involved is going, oh, I don't know, X, what do you think? Unfortunately, how you do that yourself, I'm not entirely sure. As I've said, when it's been bad days, like I've just slowly escaped out of the room, hoping it was a little bit evident that it felt uncomfortable, but I don't know if I would advocate that. But having an ally is very, very important. So maybe talk about this, speak about it as a fishbowl, unconference, whatever it is, but maybe let people know the impact that it has. I hope that answers your question.
Rose, do you have anything?
I have to say, actually, I don't think I've experienced it much. Maybe it's happened and I haven't noticed, but I actually, although I am a woman in tech, I don't most of the time feel like it at work. Even though there's not a huge amount of women, I don't feel treated differently, and I have a lot of male colleagues who are quite good advocates for women in tech as well, and I think I've seen them call things out that weren't happening to me but were happening to other people. So sorry, I haven't got a good answer for that. Move company.
I can answer that question if you want. I'm not necessarily a software developer, but this happens to me quite often because of that, because I walk into a room, most of the time I have a backpack on, and they bring me in to talk to a bunch of CTOs about how they were going to attract developers or something, and it's like, who's this child? And I found early on, even if it's uncomfortable, is to reintroduce yourself into the conversation. Because chances are you may have been a part of the initial discussion and then all of a sudden it's like you disappeared when you didn't. So sometimes, even if it's a bit uncomfortable, is not necessarily be boisterous or cut anyone off, but re-engage with it. Yes, I agree. And if you keep doing that within a conversation, even if you annoy them, they can't but remember you're there. And then you sort of build the skills of doing that in a way that pulls you into the conversation. But in the beginning, I just used to, yep, I'm still here. Yep, I agree with that. Yes. And it sort of helped eventually so it's not a fail-safe, but just reminding people that you're there, even if it was just agreeing with what they're saying or disagreeing, is a great way to do it as well. Cool. We had a question in front of you. Yes?
I can direct this question to anyone because you all talk about how to bring up ideas, but what advice would you have for middle management where they encourage questions or they encourage ideas, but everyone says it's a good idea, but no one goes along with it, and it kind of dies down no matter how much you try to push it.
Radek, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I can have a go. I think perhaps one of the things to do is to try and build a little bit of momentum behind your idea. So maybe test your idea amongst your colleagues or test it against somebody else, because if you think of it from the other side, being in middle management, you want to kind of encourage people to come up with good ideas, but you can't always take everybody's good idea, right? You've already got a backlog of stuff to do, and there may be a lot of these things. So saying yes to every single good idea may potentially not fit in that context or situation. But I think what I would tend to do, and I have seen this happen, where people kind of go, okay, and not necessarily taking no for an answer without being kind of abruptly rude or pushy and saying you must listen to me, but having a discussion amongst others and just seeing if there is an appetite, and then kind of building a little bit of momentum and coming back to it maybe from a different angle, or maybe in a one-to-one situation. I think sometimes people feel maybe put on the spot if it's in a kind of a forum like this. So you kind of feel like, yeah, sure, we'll look into that and do it maybe, and it never happens. So I don't know what the context is, but yeah.
Yeah, I think sometimes if it's something that you could do, it's great just to get stuck in and have a go, because sometimes it feels like you ask for ideas and you just get left with a massive to-do list, and then, they lose momentum. But I think if someone comes up with an idea and they actually start to see some progress on it, and get other people on board, it then kind of snowballs, and it will happen. But just suggesting an idea and expecting someone else to have the same passion that you have for it, if they're not really interested, they might say they'll do it, they might get started, but it will fall by the wayside. I kind of think that sometimes, like when we have retrospectives and someone will complain about something and they'll say, oh, we need to do this, and I'm like, okay, so are you going to do that? Because there's no point in just saying let's do this. Someone has to agree, I'm going to take that action, I want to make this change. And if nobody, even at the time that it's mentioned, is interested or passionate enough to even get started, then it's not going to progress, and it's not going to get that momentum behind it. So I'd say where possible, where the ideas that you have are workable, just get started, do a proof of concept, do some research, just try something out and show, how it can work. And also going back to what we said before, bring some data behind it as to show, what benefit it would bring. So it can't be ignored, whether that's financial data, productivity, happiness, whatever it might be. Try and back it up with some data and get a bit of backing behind it.
I just want to add another thing into this. Unfortunately, I don't remember the guy's name, so I apologize for this, but I remember reading a blog, and this is from Amazon in their kind of early days when they were still selling books. And one of the developers had an idea to implement a kind of a suggestion, or whatever we kind of, I forgot the name, what we call this now, but other people also looked at this, at the shopping cart, recommendations, thank you. And so he took it to product manager, head of product management, whoever, and thought, this idea that I have, we should implement this, and it'll be great. And he was kind of met with a kind of, that is a fantastic idea. However, really what we want to do is, once we have somebody at the checkout, we want to push them through to the sale as soon as we can, not distract them with other things they could be looking at potentially buying. So, nice one, but we're not going to do that. Now, he walked away with that thinking, and worked on some stuff, actually developed it, and deployed that to the live website.
You recommend this?
Yes. There is a caveat in this that obviously at the time Amazon was working quite a lot on their platform and had enabled A/B testing, and he could isolate a small kind of user group to deploy this to. But again, this goes back to the kind of using data. He then collected the data on this and showed his product manager the sales, at which point he was like, that's a great idea, we definitely need to implement it. And now if you go shopping on Amazon, I'm sure you get badgered with, look, you can also add this and this and this, and you get a better price. So sometimes you kind of need to have that kind of persistence and trying something out. And again, if you can back it up with data, go for it. I'm not suggesting, if you haven't got A/B testing, to just go off and code something and deploy it to live without anyone agreeing, because that might not be a good thing to do.
The model of that is A/B testing. Where is the microphone gone? Okay. And then when you're done, if you could pass it back to Rob.
A question for Tim, not particularly related to leadership. First is, are you envisioning driverless cubes or driverless buses as a motor for TfL? And the second question is more technical in nature. So, considering the size of London and TfL is serving it, I would like to know, when you rolled out the contactless thing, I'm sure you would have a very heavy engineering pipeline, behind the development of that. How did you ensure that it will go first time right, and how did you performance test that feature?
Okay. The first question was on driverless.
The first question was, do you envision TfL having driverless cars or buses? I'm assuming we've already got the, what's that one? The DLR, thank you, that drives on its own. But do you envision anything else as part of that?
We were discussing this yesterday, and they said, don't answer that question. I think we've looked at it. There are some trials running at the moment around the N25. I don't think at this moment in time it's something we're investing in, but we're kind of looking at the market. We are looking at mobility as a service as well, and we've got a project in the background at the moment. But we're not. I don't think we're going to be a pioneer in this space. We're going to see how that market runs and see what happens with the Googles of the world who are investing heavily at this moment in time. It's not something that we would. The complexities are there and the risks there are too big for TfL. So we're kind of watching brief at the moment. We've got people looking at it, but that's about it, actually.
We know driverless cars tomorrow, then?
I'm not going home in a driverless car now. And the other question was on... Sorry. Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more of a technical question. I want to understand when you rolled out this contactless feature, how did you ensure that the adequate performance test happens for the size of London? And how did you make sure that it went right for the first time?
Yeah, no, it's actually a very good question, actually. And it links back to what Rosemary was saying as well. So we did, back in 2010, we did a proof of concept. And the original vision was that we'd run the rating engine, say 3 times a day. We looked at the market, we tried to get out there. There wasn't a market there, so we're going to run this rating engine 3 times a day. And what we've ended up doing, it's a very scalable architecture. We have at the moment, so TfL, 3.5 million customers per day, 11 million journeys, around about 22 million taps. They come into the back office from every reader, and we continue to rate them. So we ran a proof of concept. Peter was on the team, the other developer, Mike. We brought a consultancy to help us with the agileness at the very beginning on that journey. We spent around about £170,000, and we did a proof of concept. And what that proof of concept proved is that we don't need to run it just 3 times a day. We had a real-time engine that scaled out, and we run it continuously. So when we did go live, I had an email from my boss going, I didn't know this, but we're in Westminster. He lives in Hammersmith. I didn't know at the time. He says, the system's gone mad. I've just gone in the tube, I'm on the Hammersmith line, and it says I'm going to get out in about 10 minutes. And I kind of went, yeah, it's a bit of a feature. Because the system knows what you do on a daily basis. So it kind of then, as the taps come in and he's got the entry tap, says, yeah, you're probably going to go home, and it's that time of day, so it kind of works that through. So we have it's called the Fares and Aggregation Engine, and it sits in the back office, and we got a number of very bright people to write it for us. So there's 36 of them. All of the taps from contactless go through it, and later this year, all of the Oyster taps as well, because we're doing a 7-day cap. So it was proof of concept, some really bright people, and creating that safe environment to try things out and keep going. So that's one of the things I think we've done really well. Okay.
Amazing. I'll pass it back to the lady that originally had the microphone, and then it is going to go to this side of the room, because that poor gentleman over there is going to get a sore arm. He'll switch it on when you pass it. Can you switch on the microphone?
This is our next host, so...
Okay.
I was going to give a shameless plug, thank you very much. So I work at a very complex and large organisation at BT and we are on our transformation at the moment, which obviously we'll be sharing a bit more next month. But I have a question about the kind of leadership style. So the leadership style you all talked about has been really refreshing, it's been very collaborative, it's been very open. How did you bring HR on that journey too? So instead of rewarding individual performance, you start to reward collaborative behaviours and teams, people contributing to a team effort rather than always, me, myself and I. I'm really interested to know how you did that, because we've got to bring all of our support functions on our journey and try and industrialise the right behaviours. So if you've got any top tips on how to encourage those people, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Is there anyone in specific who wants to answer that question? Is there anyone who would like to take that question?
I can. I mean, I think for me, it's not necessarily about getting HR on board. It's about getting the managers of the teams, so the actual line managers who work with the teams and their managers. I would say that HR have very little to do with the culture in the teams. They didn't decide if we did Agile, they don't decide when we use Waterfall, they don't decide what rating the team members get at the end of the year. That's all down to the team manager and the leadership in the teams. So I would say it's about, hiring good managers, motivating your managers and training them. And, so as a leader, making sure that your managers know what kind of behaviours you're looking for and rewarding your managers for rewarding that kind of behaviour.
Nice. Oh, does that answer your question? I suppose to follow up from her question, I think you're looking to make change quite, I don't want to say recently, what's the word? Quite soon, rapidly. And obviously having those implementations in place to change sort of the thought process is one thing. Is there any sort of top tips anyone could give her in terms of like how they could address the problem, say, sooner rather than later, so they can implement those changes, I suppose, as well? Did I say that right, paraphrasing for you? Okay. Without changing the whole management team? Okay. So how do they get blockers out the way and form a collaborative environment without potentially changing the entire management team right now? I suppose this is a question for maybe Tim?
I can cover a little bit of this. We do quite a lot of training, a bit of Kanban training at the end of the day, and we run some games in there. And a lot of the middle managers, well, what we try to do with those is run games with them, and what we try and run agile games to show that sometimes the work that they do or the changes that they make actually are quite detrimental to the team. So we run these, like the coin game, you've probably seen it at the end of the day, and actually what you find is that rather than optimizing individuals, if you optimize the end-to-end, it kind of works. So there's a Kanban board game, and we've done this a few times. We just bought a number of copies actually because it's worked so well, is that we were there, we're trying to manage work in progress. And one area had a real area that was completely bottlenecked. So what we did, let's make the queue really big. Completely the wrong thing to do. And it took us quite a while. There was a number of people in the audience who were playing this game. And it took us quite a while to go, these are the wrong things we should be doing. And also as well, so I say, I build teams, we keep them together. Some of the people that have come from Waterfall, what we found is that they quite like to say, well, I want developer A and tester B to work on this, and we try and really stop that, so we kind of empower the team. But it's really hard to get people to stop because they're used to it and they quite like it, and it's part of their. So we've tried to move them from, rather than, disrupting teams because it's really disruptive, is actually move them to either become more of an architect or a product owner or a leader in the space, rather than actually trying to do. They make so many of these decisions where they try and disrupt the team, and actually the team then falls apart, and then the work that they're doing just goes down the tube.
Thank you. Do you have the microphone? We have one here, and then it's coming to you.
So, I think this question is kind of inadvertently been asked, but this is for everyone. So I'm a Scrum Master today. Do you have advice for anyone who is moving from being a manager to a leader? I hope that makes sense because I don't want to be presumptuous about, this is a manager, this is a leader, but in our organisation, I want to be able to empower people who they are a manager and they think they're a leader, but they don't know how to quite get there. So if you've got some tidbits I can take back to my workplace, that would be lovely. But yeah, just anything. Great. All four of you. No pressure.
Go for it, Radek.
I don't know if this is necessarily a tip, but I think the difference between, for me at some point, I realized that actually managers tend to get into the details and leaders tend to kind of have more of a vision and are able to kind of come up a little bit and set a compelling goal for the team and get that buy-in. So I think, leadership in some respects is kind of setting that vision and and trying to get everybody to swim in the same direction. And it's figuring out how do you get everybody going in that same direction. What is it that's important to the individuals? Why are we all here? And what is it what's the kind of the good news story that you can paint that you want to go towards? I find that's often a good way to try and, well, maybe be more leadership-like. But also there's a whole bunch of things about kind of rewarding people and acknowledging successes and that side of it. Inviting people's opinion and perhaps kind of going back to the other question here is, I don't know, naturally maybe what I find myself doing sometimes is when I do have a kind of maybe a significant change to make, rather than kind of announcing it out to everybody or saying this is what we want to do, I'll tend to kind of speak to individuals and poll for opinions and maybe in different ways kind of tell them about something I've seen over here and what's their view, because it lets me into what their thoughts are and how willing they are to change and what potential issues they see. But also, if I do find those allies before kind of having a broader conversation, I kind of feel safer, but I also know where the crowd is at, and you get that kind of feedback from people. So I think being a good leader is about being able to kind of go up and down, be kind of face-to-face with individuals, connect with individuals, but also set some kind of compelling vision and make it real for those individuals to say, why is it that I need all of you to collaborate and swim in the same direction?
Unfortunately, we don't have time for everyone to answer that question. And I know we have to wrap up, but if you don't give it to that poor gentleman in the white shirt over there, I will feel very, very bad. So unfortunately, this is the last question. We are going to have drinks networking afterwards, so if you do have pressing questions, I think our panelists are all around to approach them specifically, but at the moment, we only have time for him.
I'll try to make this quick. It's probably not quick. So my question is, as a leader and as a point of aggregation of information in your organization, you kind of deal with different KPIs, SLOs, or OKRs, depending on what you call them in your organization. And they kind of aggregate to you. How do you make sure that you cross-pollinate that information and then you don't hold accountable a team against another? Because everybody tunes towards different things. And I think that's one of the really difficult things, especially in the context of retrofitting culture, like Tim said about DevOps. DevOps will bring its own things and ideas. How do you make all of that?
Is there anyone specifically you would like to answer that question? Oh. Does anyone want to take that question?
I could give an answer. So definitely something that we've tried in the team is to own those facts and figures, the KPIs, whatever you want to call them, ourselves. So as a team, decide what information you're going to publish. That way the team are actually bought into improving it and they won't just try and game the numbers. But if you're presenting information outwardly, it stops people coming and asking you for what they think they want to know. If you're proactively deciding this is what we're going to tell people about our performance, our throughput, how our systems are doing, make that information available so no one tries to think up random stuff to ask you about. So if you can, I know everyone doesn't have that choice, but if you can, I would say, for me, that's definitely been the most successful way.
Could I also just add that I think that we've seen a lot of clients sort of go into that sort of rabbit hole of like getting stuck to these figures. Every team is different. I think just like code coverage doesn't necessarily imply quality, some of these metrics are the same. I think it might be more valuable to understand the impact the team is making, the innovation that the team is driving, and maybe take the metrics with a little bit of pinch of salt.
Perfect. Thank you. Unfortunately, I think that is all the time we have for. I did have one last question, but I'm not going to ask because I think I'll be kicked out. But I hope you all enjoyed that and hopefully go away with a few sort of top tips to take to your current role or your career in general. But I just wanted to give a huge round of applause back to our panelists for being a part of tonight.